Great. Well, thank you all again for joining us tonight for the Linda Loring Nature Foundation Science Pub Speaker Series. I'm really excited for tonight's speaker. We have Dr. Murry Burgess, the co-founder and CEO of Field Inclusive, which is an award-winning nonprofit organization dedicated to amplifying and supporting historically excluded biologists and researchers. In addition to her work as a DEI activist, Dr. Burgess is an associate wildlife biologist and assistant professor at Mississippi State University. As an urban ecologist and ornithologist, Murry researches the impacts of anthropogenic stressors on songbird metabolic health and physical development. She's also a children's book author and public scientist. So, Dr. Burgess, thank you so much for joining us tonight. She's going to be giving us a talk entitled Social Field Safety and Urban Ecology. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me so much. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen and we'll get started. Let's see, screen sharing, present, and then let's swap that. Awesome. So thank you all for coming. What I wanted to do is just kind of talk a little bit about all the aspects of my work, kind of tie it together for you, and overall just emphasize why it matters. So my name is Murry. I grew up a lot in the suburbs of Minnesota, Florida, Tennessee, Mississippi, mostly Mississippi, but with an interest in the wildlife around me. And I ended up following this interest in wildlife into a bachelor's degree in wildlife fisheries and aquaculture at Mississippi State University. I also have my associate wildlife biologist certification from the Wildlife Society. And I went on to grad school at North Carolina State University to pursue my PhD in fisheries, wildlife, and conservation biology. And there is where I really got to hone my skills in bird ID and endocrinology and working with some of those field and lab components for birds. And so after completing that dissertation, I became a tenure track assistant professor at Mississippi State. So they wanted me back, and I am back at my alma mater now as an assistant professor. And I teach applied ecology and animal behavior right now. And I do a lot of ornithology and urban ecology research, specifically looking at how stressors affect songbird health and the physical development of the nestlings. And so I'm both in the field and in the lab conducting experiments, monitoring how nestlings grow under light pollution and how that affects just avian ecology and phenology. I also sometimes work with large citizen science databases that involves people just collecting data to contribute to science and look at how that affects clutch size trends. But as said, my work extends past ornithology and ecology. I'm also a children's book author with both self-published works and a professionally published STEM series with little brown young readers called Sparrow Loves Birds. And I am also, as if I didn't have enough, I'm also an advocate for field safety in the natural sciences and a DEI advocate. Also a public scientist. So I do a lot of interviews and with media, podcasts, articles, journalism, and things like that. And so along with all of that, I also co-founded a profit Field Inclusive, which I will talk a little bit about later. So I'm just going to break down each one of these for you and just kind of let you guys get to know me and my work a little bit better. So first of all, when I talk about anthropogenic stressors, we always think about human impacts like pollution, impacts to climate change and everything. But sometimes we don't quite consider all of the other sensory pollutants that we might put into the environment, like noise pollution or light pollution. And so you might have heard of light pollution, or also called artificial light at night. The biggest source is street lights, but it also comes from buildings, billboards, traffic lights on our cars. And not only does it contribute a little bit to carbon emissions and makes it so we don't sleep quite as well as night, it also affects the wildlife so that they also don't sleep quite as well at night. And this issue of light pollution is a global issue, and the amount of light pollution in the environment just continues to grow and grow each year with urban development. So this huge issue definitely needs some looking at for research to like just how does it impact birds? And so we know a little bit about how light pollution impacts the adult birds, some of which is changing in their migration. Birds rely on the stars a lot to guide their migration. And so if light pollution is clouding the stars and they can't really see their way, they might get a little bit lost or disoriented, and they might unfortunately end up colliding with buildings in these urban centers, or they'll be like grounded, which puts birds in a vulnerable state, and a vulnerable state to predation and everything. There's about like 1 billion building collisions per year. And so that is a huge issue that is very popular for study in light pollution right now. We also know that light pollution causes earlier dawn song, extended foraging periods, and earlier mating and nesting in birds. But what is even less known is how light pollution impacts bird nestlings. And so, if their parents are affected, that's going to affect how the nestlings are raised. But they also might have a direct impact, which I nickname the urban phenotype. And so chicks that are raised in light pollution are more likely to beg for food longer throughout the night. They're likely to be more stressed. They're also likely to develop their feathers faster. In thought, if you develop your feathers faster, you get to fly away from the stress, and the stress in this case being the light pollution. But that comes at a cost of if you're putting all your energy towards developing feathers, then you're putting less energy into developing other parts of your body, like building up body mass and strength. And so overall, that kind of trade-off might lead to lower brood success. And so that's the main thing of what I'm studying. And so just that goes to the field aspect. So far, I've done this with wild barn swallows and now with captive zebra finches. So extensive field work plus some laboratory work looking at different aspects of how nestlings will grow under pollution. When I was outdoors, I had this giant barn filled with about 30 30 to 40 pairs of barn swallows that would nest there every year. And so what I did was I just put up the lights above each of the nests and monitored how the birds grew over time. And so kind of repeating that indoors, which this year I'm kind of excited to be indoors because with field work, there was an issue of a snake that kept coming in and eating my chicks. And so now I don't have to worry about the snake eating my homework, so to speak. And so working with those zebra finches, here is an example of some of the samples that I'm taking. So I monitor their nest just to look at how many eggs they're laying, how long it takes those eggs to hatch and incubate. I take body measurements of the chicks, so I weigh them as they grow, measure how long their head is and their bill and their feet, how fast their wings are growing and things. I also particularly measure feather growth because, like I said, I expect feather growth to be a little bit faster if those nestlings want to get away from light pollution faster. I take photos as they grow up, which you see on that bottom right, how super duper tiny they start off. And they grow to be about the size of an adult within about 3 weeks. So it's a really fast process of development here. Also, a lot of experience with bird banding and blood sampling just to see better able to track individuals over time. And so overall, what I hope for that type of research to contribute to is creating more bird-friendly urban landscapes. People are just going to continue to expand and develop. So as we do that, we want to make sure that the spaces we create are healthy, both for us and for the wildlife that live there. And so if we're talking specifically about light pollution, some suggestions are to turn off the lights whenever you can, or if you can't turn them off, at least have them kind of enclosed and facing downwards so they're not just spreading light particles out into the atmosphere. And to use red and yellow colored lights because those are kind of softer and less harsh than other colors. And motion sensor lights are super popular now, so they're off when you need them to be and on when you need them to be. And again, in those different colors that are better for both birds and for us too. Some of the things that affect birds affect humans as well. So you might not think about that all the time, but every animal, including humans, needs a good night's sleep in order to regulate their metabolism and their growth and development. So that's the main focus of what I do with my research. Um, Another thing that I hope to do with talking about urban ecology is to inspire kids to get out and start looking in their natural environments, even if they live in like a city or something. I hope to spark curiosity in any surrounding that a child might grow up in and learn that even common wildlife or like wildlife that they might not think of as important is still valuable and worth conserving. And so these are the books projects that I have previous and ongoing. My first book was actually Why Wolves Howl in 2017, which is fictional, a story about a wolf becoming friends with the moon. And even though it's like not a scientific book, I hope that that also kind of sparks curiosity in kids to just be interested in animals. Sparrow Loves Birds came out last year, and I have QR codes and order links for that. You can find it pretty much anywhere, Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble. Just look up that title and you can find it. And there will be a sequel coming out in about 2026 about Sparrow Loves Reptiles. Oh, I should say what they're about. So Sparrow is this 5-year-old girl that you see on the cover, and she is super curious. And she goes outside and looks at the birds and learns how to identify them by their colors, their movement, and the songs that they sing. So she's teaching the audience how to identify birds. And so a similar thing will be going on with reptiles as Sparrow goes out on another adventure. So many projects in the works. Hopefully that is something you guys would want to check out. But going back to some of the field work that I did, I encountered many social safety issues. And I'll talk more about like what I'm calling social safety, but essentially this is what happened. So I was working in a very rural area in a red state. And so every day I was mostly by myself, especially during the pandemic years where I couldn't have anybody with me. And so I was alone in this area with Trump signs, Confederate flags, and just sometimes out at night because I was working with light pollution and had to look at some of the lights and monitor some things and in the dark at like midnight, deep, deep darkness. And so I had safety precautions with me. I would take my dog when I could. He's down there in the corner, have my knife, pepper spray. And I was just on a good property where I was conducting my research, but all around me seemed to be people who didn't really want me working in that type of area and were unsure about why I was out there, what I was doing, what even is the purpose of the type of research. And so I had to think about not only like, safety from wildlife, but safety from people who are around me. And I did write an article during that time from Walter Magazine, again, which is linked for you and you can read if you're interested. But in having those experiences, I realized that I was not the only one. Unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues and friends in the field would talk about all of their field research experiences, always encountering like an angry property owner or racist remarks or signage around them, or just the general idea, especially if they were women, that they don't belong in this field. And so that inspired me and one of my friends to create a nonprofit called Field Inclusive. And Field Inclusive is striving to provide tangible and actionable improvements in these outdoor spaces by addressing social field safety issues and relating that to access, diversity, and inclusion. Because we envision this world in which the outdoors feel safe and welcoming, regardless of somebody's personal identity. And so all field researchers deserve a right to the tools necessary for success in their field work, because going outside and doing research is part of our jobs. but there's no HR and policy regulations on university or institutional levels that can help mitigate some of these things that we encounter. And so that's my friend Lauren on the left. We co-founded Field Inclusive. And right now we do various offerings like workshops, social field safety trainings. We also have research grants and travel awards open to support marginalized students. And in January, we just wrapped up our Field Inclusive Week, which features informative webinars, bird walks, and different community building activities. So we're super busy and we have all types of resources and activities for everybody to participate. But going back to that safety aspect. So what is safety? Just in general, the condition of being protected from or unlikely to cause danger, risk, or injury. And so when we talk about safety in the field, the first kind of things that pop up are probably oh, watch out for snakes or watch out for poison ivy. Be careful when you're walking in dangerous or rocky terrain. Make sure that you have a phone charger. Make sure you have your insect repellent and your sunscreen, all of these physical safety issues. And so that is super duper important, terming it physical field safety. Definitely want to start there in terms of if you're going into the field, what do you need to be prepared? But there's also this other aspect of what we're calling social field safety. And these are safety risks that may come up due to somebody's just personal identity, the way that they look, the way that they're dressing, talking, and basically appearing in the field. So we have some of these examples of a Black woman being approached by law enforcement while she's outside trying to do surveys. Somebody of the LGBTQ community hearing hate speech while they're sampling in the field, and different examples of religious experiences in a hateful landscape, and somebody with a disability not being accommodated while they're in the field. So these are all examples of social field safety. And so who is at risk and what are some of the unwelcoming fieldwork settings? So at-risk individuals are people who are minorities or belong to some of the following minority groups, which is race or ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, disability, and religion. And at-risk individuals are at risk because they're more likely to be harassed or questioned or have assumptions made against them while carrying out field work, and might be more likely to encounter discrimination while they're trying to do science outside. And of course, it usually happens in people-heavy areas. Doesn't have to be a city, can also be rural landscapes, places where people aren't very welcoming of people who don't look like them. Some common issues that might be encountered is negative encounters with law enforcement. I can't tell you how many times I've heard stories of the police being called on surveyors, people who are just out watching birds or trying to take surveys, collect samples, because the assumption is that they look suspicious. They're doing stuff with weird equipment, don't know what it is, they'll have the police called on them. Similarly, there's negative encounters with property owners or the local community, and sometimes issues arise from within the team as well, with team members or supervisors of the institution. And again, this is all rising from issues with identity and the stereotypes that come with them. So anybody who is visually marked as other, whether that other be race, ethnicity, international status, gender, religion, disability, body shape, all types of things like that. And so with our trainings for Field Inclusive, we have recognized that this is an issue and that there aren't really policies to take care of how to keep employees and students safe while conducting scientific research. And so what we do is advocate for safety tips on both a personal level and then on the supervisory level, and then all the way at the top of adopting institutional policies that can help protect students. Most institutions currently do lack field safety policies and equipment. So unfortunately, it's often up to the student to advocate for themselves and protect themselves however they can. And so I wanted to give you guys some of these tips as well, whether you are in the field yourself or you supervise somebody who is doing field research, or if you like just have friends or family who are in this type of work. Here are some general safety tips and solutions you can kind of take with you. So on this personal level, having a list of emergency contacts and being able to share that list with somebody trustworthy who can like check up on you, make sure you got there safely, call in your call for you if need be. Create a safety plan and share it with the team. Vet the field site that you're going to, preferably before you start your field research. And vetting the area could be both checking on that physical component, what kind of physical safety gear do you need, as well as what could be some social field safety issues that might arise. And to kind of mitigate some of those before they start, you could alert the neighbors some kind of way that there will be research in this area, how long that research will happen and what it will entail. You could even alert the local law enforcement that there will be research taking place in this area. You could wear field safety gear that identifies you as a researcher. And field safety gear is something that you can wear on your body or attached to your equipment or your vehicle that just identifies you with the institution that you're working for. It kind of says that like, hey, I'm official and I'm out here doing official work. And then finally, we do advocate for carrying non-lethal self-defense tools, such as pepper spray. If pepper spray is not legal where you live, bear spray, wasp spray, taser, keychain weapons, and things like that. And then if we take that all the way up to the supervisory or institutional level, we want to make sure that these policies are baked into the institutional level protocol so that if something were to happen, there is a way to take accountability or mitigate those issues. And so some suggestions there are work to create a mandatory safety plan or policy for all students and employees who do field work. And make sure that plan is shared with somebody so everybody, knows where you are and knows what you're doing and can help look out for you. Create a code of conduct for everyone in your workplace, including consequences should the code not be followed. And on the Field Inclusive website, under the resources tab, we do have a code of conduct template if you need a guide on where to start creating one of those. The supervisor should help vet the field sites and the property owners for any issues. Make sure that your student or employee is comfortable working in that area. And if possible, reject dangerous field sites. We know that some species are only located in very specific areas, or for whatever reason, you can't choose another field site, but wherever possible, try to work where the safety is the best. And make sure you stay up to date on areas where you're sending your workers, where research is taking place, just in case the area becomes unsafe to visit. Help communicate the research project to local law enforcement and property owners, and be somebody who can provide easily accessible field safety gear. One of the best things that my advisor did for me when I was out in the field, feeling unsafe in that rural area, was making those posters to put on my car, magnetic little posters that said, hey, I'm a field researcher with North Carolina State University. I'm out here doing official work. And that made me feel just like 10 times better, just having that label on me. And that is a really important thing to do in general, just advocating for the students and employees with your institution. Because at the end of the day, research is super fun and cool, but getting that research done is not worth it if it's going to cost somebody's safety or mental well-being. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is just accessibility as a part of safety, and also kind of its own separate thing, because we want to make sure that everybody who is interested can still be included and participate in field work. And so I'm not going to read every single one of these to you, but there are a lot of suggestions for making your field site a little bit more accessible. So even just something as simple as saying, how long will the field work day last? Will there be food and water there? Do we need to bring our own? What type of equipment will we need? What's the bathroom situation like? Like, is there indoor facilities? Are we peeing in a bucket? Like, just saying that information first and foremost can help soothe people's fears and let them know what to prepare for. You can also look into the accessibility of the field site itself, whether that be like the terrain or the equipment that's being used. Is there ways to kind of expand that equipment to accommodate somebody who might need extra assistance? And then finally, just making sure that team members and team leaders especially are at least somewhat aware of like the disability or health or safety concerns of everybody on the team. Just planning in advance can help mitigate a whole lot of issues that might from happening in the first place. And then finally, my concerns aren't being listened to. I'm trying to be safe. Nobody cares. What do I do next? And so, guidelines to self advocacy, you can do it. Your voice is important and it matters. And so, here are just some tips to advocate for yourself or for your colleagues or your friends in this field. So first of all, try again. Sometimes saying it once isn't going to sink in. You might need to schedule a serious conversation, make it known and documented that like, hey, I have this issue. What are we going to do about it? If you have peers or a group with similar concerns, it can help to voice that as a group. Just try to make it a very serious issue. If your immediate supervisor is like difficult or unresponsive, move up the ladder, like bring it to the next person in charge to see if they have a solution to what to do. If you need to, you can get a professional mediator involved. I know a lot of universities have what's called an ombudsman office, or like a professional mediator for that university. And that can be something that can help have these difficult conversations. Also included on the Field Inclusive website is a whole folder full of scientific research that states why having these accommodations and having diverse identities in the field makes for better science. So sometimes people just need that, oh, my research will be better if I do this. If they're not listening to like personal concerns, whatever, pull yourself up by your bootstraps is fine. Point them to a scientific resource that can say otherwise. Document. When you have these conversations, it's always good to make note of it and what was said and who was in attendance in the meetings, just so you have that record of evidence that you have been advocating for yourself. And then always emphasizing, remember, no job or data is worth your life or mental well-being. And so that's just a small sample of some of the resources that Field Inclusive has. I highly encourage you to check us out. If you go to our website in the resources tab, we have a accessibility checklist, that code of conduct document, all of those literature sources, a personal medical card template, and just many, many more things. And also, if you go to our YouTube channel, we have our recorded talks and webinars from previous Field Inclusive weeks and anniversary speakers. A lot of those people are talks from professionals with marginalized identities, and they have expertise in providing accessibility accommodations and making the field more diverse. So follow us on YouTube, and there are all of our other social media links as well. We'd be happy to have you as part of our community. And so I wanted to give this little summary because sometimes it seems like all of these things are disconnected. Like, what am I even doing in all of these different fields? So just like in summary, I strive to create a safer environment for birds and for people. And I'm taking this multidisciplinary approach with being a scientific researcher in ecology, with doing both field work and lab work, with writing and publishing books, with being a CEO for Field Inclusive and doing this advocacy work. All of these things tie together for me in improving the natural sciences and making the world a safer, healthier place for both people and for animals. And so, with all of that work, I hope to teach that wildlife can be found in your own backyard and that wildlife is valuable and worth protecting. And then the people are also part of your community and in your workplace, and those people are just as valuable as the wildlife, too. And so with that, I will stop rambling on. I have all of my contact information up as well as contact information for Field Inclusive. So if you want to take a photo or screenshot or anything, all of those links are there for you. And those Linktree links will give you everything, including links to like websites, resources, social media, and everything. So thank you all so much for listening.
Ah, thank you so much, Murray. I really, really appreciate it. This is the one hard part about webinars is we can't all clap for you. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I have definitely learned a lot, and I will encourage everyone. We participated a lot of different Linda Loring Nature Foundation employees participated in different aspects of Field Inclusive Week this year. I feel like we learned a lot as employers of a lot of we are in the field ourselves, but also employers of students, often of college age and high school age. And I feel like we're learning a lot more about how to make the field more comfortable and safe for people too. So I really appreciate
That is awesome. I'll stop this share, but if you want to send out contact information afterwards, like feel free to do that too.
it. Great. Well, I have some questions for Murray, but please, for those in attendance, if you have any questions for Murray, please type it up in the chat or the Q&A. One question I had for you, Murray, was something that you said about helping students advocate for themselves, or that, if you are a student, that you can advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
As an employer or as a supervisor for people in the field, what can I do, or what can we do at Linda Loring as an example to help someone feel that they can advocate for themselves? Like that we can tell them over and over that we're welcoming and we can listen, but what's a way when people are new to a position as well?
Yeah, so I think one of the best things to do is kind of put that trustworthiness towards the forefront. So that could look like when bringing in somebody, like just asking them what accommodations they might need, or having just like an inclusive support system of like, hey, we're all here for each other. This is what we do to kind of make sure that everybody has a role to play in the field work and everybody is feeling like safe and accommodated. That could also be like having a code of conduct, or like just putting into like, here's a reporting system, even if it's anonymous. It's just like, hey, what worked about this field work? What didn't work about the field work? What would you change? Just something as simple as that, just to show that like you care and you're listening.
I think that's a great point when you made about at universities, there's a more obvious channel, like the
Mhm.
ombudsman. That's always a hard word to me to say.
Yeah.
But in a small organization, it might not be clear who to go to. So maybe saying it before there's an issue, like in
Right.
orientation, like, hey, if you have a problem, this is the direction you go to.
Right.
I also want to say, I think I said this before we had people on here, but um, we really loved Sparrow Loves Birds at the Linda Loring Nature Foundation. And so I was really excited to hear that Sparrow also loves reptiles.
Yes.
Is Sparrow gonna like plants at some point? I'm a plantacologist. I'm like, come on, Sparrow.
I hope so. Right now, those are the only two books that have been like signed on for the contract that I have with Little Brown. But I would love for Sparrow to learn like trees and plants and talk about like bugs. Sparrow can learn a whole bunch of things in nature. And so I'd have fun continuing that series for sure.
Excellent. Um, all right, come on, people. I need some questions from you. Um, All right, I'm gonna look at I have written down a lot of notes. We don't actually have a code of conduct specific yet, so I'm really glad to hear. I was gonna ask you about it, and then you said there was already a template, which is really helpful. Um, and I think another thing I think about is with accessibility, both of people enjoying our trails, but also having students come and do field research. Um, Different landscapes can be really different. And I would love to hear
Mhm.
you talk about how, like, my perception of what a difficult trail is or what an accessible trail is might be different than what another person thinks of. So, can you talk a little bit about that perception of accessibility too?
Right. And I will preference everything by saying I myself do not have physical disabilities. And so everything that I've learned have been from like other people and other sources. Just putting that out there. But I know that some of the most common difficulties can be like the terrain of the trails. Gravel can be really hard because it's shifting for like wheelchairs or like walking mobility aids to like dig into and be stable when walking onto those. I also know it's usually an issue for like not enough seating throughout the trails or like places to fill water, not enough shade. So if somebody needs to like take a break and recharge, they have those little stations to kind of keep going. Um, I think those would be the main two. Parking lots as well. I think some people like don't always consider the parking lot like as part of the facility or the trail. And so just making sure like there's wheelchair ramps and that is like close enough to the entrance where the disability parking spots are to the like the start of the trail or like the entrance to the building are pretty close and accessible too.
Well, thank you. I think some of us, when we worked at a place for a long time too, we have 275 acres of property that we manage.
Mm,
We don't often go far afield to do our own field research, but I will say that we get so comfortable and knowing as year-round staff with our location that it's kind of like I have to look at it with different eyes when we invite new people in or like bring in new people of what the dangers are, what the hazards are, but also
mhm.
what we take for granted. And I think that's a really important um, thing to think about. So I'm going to go to Field Inclusive and look at some of your checklists as well.
Thank you. Yes, and we are constantly learning too at Field Inclusive. Just even though me and my co-founder Lauren have had some of these experiences and like safety issues come up, we're not a part of all of these marginalized identities.
Mhm.
So we're constantly learning and bringing in other experts to teach us and to share with everybody else on what some of these issues are and how we can address them.
Great, thank you. I also wanted to ask you a few questions. I know you touched on some of your research that you're
Mhm.
interested in. On Nantucket, we're an island, and maybe obviously, maybe not, but we have actually talked a lot about light pollution on the island. There's a long history of astronomy on the island, and we have loved our dark skies. And there's, kind of like new lighting bylaws being brought into the island.
Mhm.
But I'm really interested in your research, and I wanted to hear from a practical standpoint. I know you had some information about what we can do to improve light for wildlife and birds in particular. Are there anything else we can do or things that you want to add that maybe you didn't get to include? We are a light pollution aware place.
Nice. That's super great to hear as more and more places are like trying to implement like structures and stuff. I know one thing that I didn't mention is like blackout curtains. So people I talked about like buildings can be like a huge source of light. But even just like putting in a blackout curtain at night, that like blocks inside light from coming outside. And also it benefits people too for outside light is not coming inside. I know I have blackout curtains in my bedroom and I sleep with like a mask sometimes. So it's just like I need that darkness to help myself sleep. But that's always a huge one.
um, I was interested in the term that you coined that was it was had phenology in the
Yeah.
title.
To the urban phenology or urban phenotype.
Yeah, the urban
Mhm.
phenotype. Thank you. So I know your work was on barn swallows and the captive birds. I can't remember what they were.
Yeah, the zebra finches.
Zebra finches. Have you seen or have others also done work on other species? I'm just curious how typical that is across different species.
It's not very typical right now, but there are like more and more studies popping up. I know there's been a lot of work on like European species like blackbirds and great tits, European tits. Um, the European research is like way ahead of us. So I'm here in Mississippi trying to keep up. But they've seen like a lot of those similar effects in all of those species too, with just increased begging behavior or like parents and chicks seeming like restless and the nest not being like quite as successful due to assumedly some of those metabolic issues of like sleep and stress and everything like that.
So I'm enter one of sorry, I'm gonna dominate all the questions. Oh wait, there is a question. Sorry, I'm like I have a follow-up question. And then
Okay.
there is one on here, but we have a nest box study on tree swallows, and of course we have like very dark skies where our property is located. We have 50 nest boxes. And we've been looking at some of the abiotic conditions and biotic conditions of each nest
Mhm.
box, which looking at nest success. And what I'm interested in is how like I with your research you had the lights like right almost directly on the nest or very close. And so
Mhm.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts or on how the proximity of a light that would be to a nest box. Sorry, I'm putting all these
Yeah.
things together in my
No,
brain.
it's
Question
cool.
made sense.
Yeah, and so the lights that I used were like pretty low level, like low intensity lights. And
Mhm.
so I put them that close like for kind of two reasons. One, to like mimic like a street light. A lot of birds like to nest in like that kind of infrastructure near like lamps and street lights and building posts and things. And two, so if we're talking specifically about nestlings, we know that the parents are incubating, so like sitting on top of them. And so they're not going to get exposed to that much direct light. It's like if you close your eyes in a bright room, you still know the lights are on, but you're just not experiencing quite as much. And so that is kind of the reasoning for like close, low level lights. But a lot of the experiments I see, they just try to mimic the intensity of whatever the natural street lighting is for that area.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'm like,
Mhm.
what other projects can I have students do this sort of? All right, we do have a question. What are some of the ways to communicate and improve communication with marginalized communities to let them know that we are a welcoming space to take a walk, go birding, learn about conservation, etc.?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and sometimes a hard one to achieve, especially if it's like a brand new initiative to trying to like reach and bring in some of those people. It's like, how do you let them know that, hey, we're welcome and like we're cool and we want you here? Um, so I think one of the first things is just, first of all, sharing out that message. However you advertise your things, through social media or flyers or anything, put that on there. Say we are welcoming to marginalized communities. We are a safe space. We have accessible bird walks or whatever it may be that you're focusing on. You can advertise that. And then two, it always helps if you have like pictures of previous events or something like that to kind of share those out with permission as well, just so people can see. It's like, oh, there's a variety of people that come to these things.
No, thank you. All right, I think we don't have any more questions. Come on, people.
Don't be shy.
Hi, this is a welcoming space. You can ask any question.
Yes.
There's research questions, there's children's book questions,
No question is a dumb question.
field inclusive questions. Um, I will say, because it's the Sarah and Murray show apparently. One of the things that I learned about, I think you guys used to do at Field Inclusive, um, had a small grant at one point for like field equipment to get people kind of off the ground.
Mhm.
That was something that I learned about, and from one of our previous interns too, giving an exit interview, basically told us that, field boots are really expensive, and it never like occurred to me. So, I mean, I know they're expensive for me, but I didn't think about it as something that um, was a barrier. And so one of the things
Hmm.
that we've done was try to make that some aspects of field equipment that we used to assume people would come with kind of help with
Right.
some of that. And so I think you guys definitely helped show us that that was something that was a barrier for some people.
Yeah, it can be. I remember being a first time undergrad and they told me I needed waiters. And I was just like, what are waiters? Where do I get them? And why are they so expensive? It's just like sometimes when you're in it for a long time, you just like don't think it's like, oh, somebody might not have heard of what this equipment is or where to get it. And that's one thing that we advocate for at Field Inclusive is if you can like cultivate like a field gear closet where there's some of those like common items that you can borrow or lend out to people who might not have them or give them away too, like depending on what it is. I'm sure people don't want to share sweaty field boots all the time, but just trying your best to have some of that equipment accessible. And yeah, there is currently a I don't want to say it wrong. There's a travel grant open right now. But yeah, we have both research grants and travel grants. The research ones you can put towards any type of equipment that you need, or even paying like technician salaries if you want to.
That's great. And I think, we were before we opened up the Zoom, we were talking about how, it's kind of nice having things be open and on Zoom and it's more accessible in a way. And I think that's true for a lot of conferences too that have either gone hybrid or had more online presence as well. Going to a conference is really expensive, whether
Hmm.
it's the registration or the travel expense. And so I
Yeah.
think a lot more students have been able to share their research and learn from others in a virtual framework too. All right. We have another question. Not a question, but a thank you to both of us. Such an important conversation. I thought a lot about safety in the field, but so many great ideas here I hadn't even considered. So thank you. Thank you, Danielle. Really
Yes,
appreciate it.
thank you so much. And always open to discussing more if you ever want to shoot me an email. Like, happy to help.
Thanks. All right. Well, we're getting close to time. So I want to thank you, Murray. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off for the evening?
I don't think so. If there's anything that I forgot to cover, again, just like feel free to email me or email Field Inclusive for those resources. We are always open to having conversations and helping organizations with their unique issues and collaborating with new groups as well. So don't hesitate to reach out. We are happy to partner and hear from you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Murray. I'm gonna stop sharing and then I will